The Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative is a program that generates revenue by auctioning off emission credits to big industrial polluters. And the idea here is that the money that is generated would be used by the state to help combat and adapt to the effects of a changing global climate. This year, about a third of the revenue that is brought in from what's known as RGGI over the past year, $41 million, was taken in the budget process and transferred into the state's general fund as part of a final spending agreement. Here now to talk to me a little bit more about RGGI and the impact of this decision is Conor Bambrick, the Air and Energy Director at Environmental Advocates of New York. Welcome to Capitol Tonight.
Oh, Liz, thanks for having me.
It's our pleasure. So we've touched on this a little bit on the show. First of all, we should point out that this sweep, which is really effectively what it was, is bigger than expected, correct? The governor proposed something, and then the legislature was like, yeah, we'll do that, and we'll do a little bit more, unfortunately.
Yes, the governor had originally proposed taking $36 million from the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative proceeds and moving them onto the general fund in the executive budget proposal.
And there was a hope, or sort of understanding, that some of this money would be used for the Environmental Protection Fund, but is that actually in the bill language?
So in the governor's briefing books, when he put out the executive budget, there was language that suggested that a portion of these proceeds would go to the EPF, another portion would go to back up clean energy tax credits, some tax credits that have been on the books for well over a decade now. But when you actually look at the budget bills, the ones that were passed and what the governor proposed, there was no direct linkage to any of these programs.
Okay, so that was like designed to make you feel warm and fuzzy, like not perhaps be as angry as you might have been about it. I mean, you writ large the environmental community. The thing is, though, overall, the environmental community did fairly well in this budget. I mean, this is probably the biggest negative in the negative column.
There were certainly some wins and losses. This one definitely stands out because while the Environmental Protection Fund did receive a boost in funds, which will be very helpful to the programs it supports, it came at the expense of another clean energy program. And we don't view that as sort of a win across the board. I think it's more of a wash. So
what I don't understand, though, is how this potentially opens the state up for litigation?
Sure. Well, in New York, just take a step back, the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative is comprised of 9 different states that have operated in this agreement to cap carbon pollution from power plants.
Right.
New York is the only one out of those states that did not put this into statute, did not pass a bill through the legislature to make RGGI what it is today.
So it was created through executive order?
It was done administratively through regulations by the Department of Environmental Conservation and also from NYSERDA. So
there's less protection then when you do it that way?
Exactly. The concern here is they're raising these funds. The funds under the NYSERDA regulations are to be dedicated to carbon abatement, energy efficiency, clean energy projects. By taking these funds and moving them onto the state budget, you create a situation where you potentially have to worry about an unauthorized tax because the legislature never approved this.
And so there has been a history of some conservative challenges to RGGI?
There have. The most recent being a challenge that was brought by an organization backed by the Koch brothers.
Right.
That the state ultimately won. The lawsuit was dismissed, but certainly the fear is there that it could come back at any time.
But is it a real, is a well-founded fear? In other words, you know, there was this lawsuit, it was dismissed. Is there any signs from Koch brothers related organizations that, we know now that we have another in on this? Or you're just worried for the future because they've already tried once and what's to stop them from trying again? Exactly.
Right now it's a general concern. It's as if New York put a target out there.
And they're always searching for targets, right? So interestingly, this is not the first time that RGGI funds have been swept or borrowed, as the case may be. The Patterson administration had a significant economic problem in terms of budget shortfall and took $90 million and used it to plug budget holes elsewhere. That money never has been paid back. So really, RGGI's already in the red, so to speak. Owed money, let's say.
Yes, they are. They owed $90 million. This was back in 2009 when a rather significant budget hole opened up. And New York was in a position where it might not be able to pay school districts the money that they were owed. And so there was funding available in RGGI. They crafted a bill that said NYSERDA shall loan this money to the state into the general fund so that they can meet their obligations.
So, you know, the only way to protect from this sort of thing is to set up some sort of lockbox. And that's been talked about, right? Legislative lockbox. And it's been talked about for all sorts of things that get swept. EPF, MTA funds, RGGI, and it never gets off the ground for some reason. Why?
That's a good question. You know, I think you know, a lot of the funds that will come into the state are going to be used for various priorities. I mean, you can't bound a legislature from year to year. So the alternative to this lockbox idea would be to have the legislature come in, finally codify RGGI, make it an official program in statute, and then take the proceeds and put them on budget year after year through the budget process.
Which would leave them less susceptible to sweeping and to be used for purposes that they're not intended for.
It would create an open process where it would be deliberated. They would have to take votes on this on an annual basis.
So the other interesting thing here, though, is that NYSERDA administers this program, and yet as it's written, this sweep does not allow them any say in whether or not these funds actually get transferred, which is different from, there was a report this morning about funds being transferred from NYPA to help, among other things, the Startup New York program and some other stuff. But NYPA actually has to sign off on that. Is that correct? Is that
Yes.
how that works?
Yes. On an annual basis, it seems the New York Power Authority is voluntarily contributing funding to the state budget, but the language that's included in the budget says it will only do so if the trustees of the authority vote to do so. The language that was included in the budget for this NYSERDA sweep of the RGGI funding did not include that language. It did not say only if the trustees of NYSERDA agree to contribute this fund.
Does NYSERDA and its trustees have a history of independent action?
That's a good question. I'm not clear as to how exactly to answer that.
Well, the reason I ask is because, in other words, why would you give NYPA the option, even though they won't, since they have a history of saying yes to moving money from point A to point B, and not give NYSERDA the option of saying yes or no over moving money from point A to point B, unless you thought that maybe NYSERDA wouldn't do it for some reason?
Well, I mean, I think the question is placed before the New York Power Authority, and it should have been placed before NYSERDA, because these trustees have a fiduciary responsibility to the authority and to the bondholders.
Right.
So there's funding streams out there that both authorities have that ultimately they're going to be accountable to the bondholders and not the state.
So just to wrap this up, is there any recourse here at all, or is this money, this $41 million that we've been discussing, gone for the next year from the RGGI fund?
Well, I think the question should be posed to the NYSERDA trustees as to whether or not they're going to approve this shift in funds, and I think going forward, what we need to do is take a new, fresh look at RGGI, make a push to actually put it in statute, and to really get NYSERDA to make a real commitment to climate and to fully commit all of the proceeds that are coming in.
Well, ironically, and we'll have to leave it here, but the Cuomo administration has been cognizant of climate change and the need for climate change related planning when it comes to projects across the state that are state funded, for example. And in the wake of Irene and Lee and Sandy, the administration made a big push actually to discuss climate change. So it's sort of interesting that they're going in this direction. It seems to be not in keeping with their
I'd
ideology.
certainly agree. I think back in September we saw 400,000 people converge on the city of New York demanding action on climate. And fast forward to the end of March this year, the first real action that was taken, the first tangible action that was taken was to take $41 million from the state's only climate-specific program.
Well, Conor, thank you so much for being here. I do appreciate it, and we'll be talking more about environmental issues as the days unfold. We get to read the budget, actually figure out what the heck is in there.